The night the blood moon rises, the past does not stay buried. 30 years ago, under a sky the color of rusted silver, humans and wolves stood at the edge of Black Hollow Forest and swore an oath that would redraw the map of the world. No human would cross into wolf territory. No wolf would set foot beyond the old river bend. And the war that had nearly erased them both would never be spoken of again. For 3 decades the forest remained untouched, a dark stretch of towering pines and ancient oaks spreading over nearly 50 square miles of protected land, marked on human maps as restricted wildlife preserve and on wolf maps as sacred ground. On the morning Clara Bennett first saw the anomaly, she did not think about war or ancient promises. She thought about data. The satellite readings flickered across her laptop screen inside a cramped research trailer parked 12 miles from the forest line, spikes of energy pulsing from a point deep within Black Hollow like a heartbeat no one else had noticed. Clara leaned closer, tucking a strand of pale blonde hair behind her ear, blue eyes narrowing as she recalibrated the instruments. She had spent 3 years chasing environmental irregularities linked to her father's final field notes, and every lead had gone cold. Every trail had ended in silence. Her father had vanished inside Black Hollow when she was 19, officially declared lost during a routine survey, unofficially whispered about as someone who had crossed a line he shouldn't have. Clara never believed the official story. The readings intensified, steady and rhythmic, not seismic, not electromagnetic, something older, something layered beneath the soil itself. She measured the coordinates twice, then a third time, her pulse quickening as the numbers aligned perfectly with a location marked in her father's journal by a single word he had underlined twice. Core. 10 miles away, unseen beyond the dense canopy, Adrian Vale stood at the highest ridge of Black Hollow, the wind carrying the faintest disturbance through the trees. As Alpha King, he had learned to sense shifts in the land the way others sensed weather, subtle changes in pressure and scent and silence. And tonight the air felt charged, restless, like the forest itself was waiting. He had been raised on the story of the pact, on the memory of flames and broken trust, on the belief that peace was fragile and must be guarded at any cost. Yet beneath that duty lived another truth he rarely spoke aloud. He carried human blood in his veins, a legacy that made some wolves question his right to rule. When the forest stirred, it did not reject him, it answered him. Clara closed her laptop and stared toward the dark tree line visible from the trailer window, her reflection faint against the glass. The rational part of her mind listed protocols, permits, and federal boundaries, but the deeper part, the part that had inherited her father's stubborn curiosity, whispered that answers did not wait for permission. She grabbed her field pack, checked the GPS unit clipped to her belt, and stepped out into the cool Michigan evening, unaware that each step toward the forest was also a step toward a truth powerful enough to fracture a 30-year peace. Above the trees, clouds shifted, revealing a pale rising moon that would soon turn red, and in the stillness between two worlds, something ancient began to wake. Clara had always believed that forests were honest places, that trees did not lie and soil did not conspire. Yet the moment she stepped past the last weathered boundary marker and into Black Hollow, she felt the shift, subtle but undeniable, like walking through a doorway she could not see. The air grew cooler by several degrees, the late summer humidity thinning into something crisp and metallic, and her GPS signal flickered once before stabilizing, as if reconsidering its loyalty. She moved carefully along a narrow deer trail, boots brushing through ferns that reached mid-calf, the scent of pine sap and damp earth grounding her racing thoughts. The coordinates pulsed in her mind the same way they had on her screen, steady and rhythmic, leading her roughly 2 miles deeper into the restricted zone. Each step felt like trespassing against something older than law, yet she reminded herself that she was a scientist, not an invader, and that data did not recognize superstition. High above, unseen from her vantage point, a pair of watchful eyes tracked her progress through the canopy breaks. Adrian did not need binoculars or instruments to locate the disturbance. The forest carried her presence to him in fragments. The snap of a twig out of rhythm with the wind, the unfamiliar cadence of human breath, the faint trace of synthetic fabric and field equipment that did not belong among his people. He closed his eyes briefly, steadying the instinct that urged immediate action, because instinct had ignited wars before, and he had sworn to be better than the past. The council would demand that he remove the trespasser without hesitation, that he demonstrate strength in the face of a broken pact. Yet something about the energy ripple beneath the ground concerned him more than the human herself. It felt reactive, almost responsive, as if the core recognized her arrival. Clara reached a small clearing she did not remember seeing on any satellite image, roughly 30 feet across, ringed by towering pines that leaned inward like silent witnesses. In the center, the soil was darker, compacted, and faintly warm beneath her palm when she knelt to test it. She frowned, brushing away the top layer of pine needles, and felt a low vibration against her skin, not enough to shake the ground, just enough to hum like distant electricity. Her father's handwriting surfaced in her memory, the way he had pressed harder on the word core, the ink slightly indented into the page. He had not written that it was dangerous. He had written that it was alive. A branch cracked softly behind her, not loud, not threatening, but deliberate. Clara rose slowly, heart accelerating, telling herself it could be a deer or a coyote, yet every instinct sharpened at once. When she turned, she did not see movement at first, only shadow layered over shadow, and then he stepped forward just enough for moonlight to catch the silver in his eyes. Adrian did not bare his teeth or raise his voice. He simply stood there, tall and impossibly still, dressed in dark clothing that blended with the trees, his presence commanding without effort. For a suspended second neither of them spoke, the forest holding its breath between them, and Clara realized with sudden clarity that the pact had not been broken by accident alone. Something had drawn her here, and something had been waiting. Clara's first instinct was not to run but to analyze, because fear could distort observation, and she had trained herself never to let emotion overwrite data. The man standing at the edge of the clearing did not move closer, yet the space between them felt charged, like the air before a summer storm. He was taller than she expected, easily over 6 feet, his posture straight and balanced, as if the uneven forest floor were perfectly level beneath him. The moonlight filtering through the branches illuminated pale skin and sharp features, and those eyes, unmistakably silver, held hers with a calm intensity that made her pulse pound in her ears. He did not look surprised to see her. He looked as though he had been waiting. "You crossed a boundary," he said finally, his voice low and steady, carrying without effort through the trees. It was not shouted, not hostile, simply stated like a fact carved in stone. Clara swallowed, forcing her breathing to slow. "I am conducting environmental research," she replied, lifting her chin despite the tremor in her hands. "There are abnormal energy readings in this area. I have the coordinates and federal clearance for adjacent land." Even as she spoke, she knew how fragile that argument sounded inside a forest that felt anything but federal. His gaze flickered briefly toward the disturbed soil at the center of the clearing, then back to her. "This land is not adjacent to anything you control," he said. The word control lingered between them. A subtle vibration pulsed under Clara's boots again, stronger now, and she felt it rise through her spine like a living current. She saw the shift in his expression, not anger but awareness, as if he sensed the same tremor and understood it differently. "You feel it," she said before she could stop herself. It was not a question. For the first time, something softened in his eyes, not warmth exactly, but recognition. "The forest is responding," he answered. "It does not respond to everyone." Clara's mind raced through possibilities, geothermal pockets, magnetic fields, underground water movement, yet none of her models accounted for the way the vibration seemed to pulse in rhythm with her own heartbeat. "My father was here," she said quietly. "Years ago. He found something and never told anyone what it was." The man's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly at the word father. He stepped one measured pace closer, not enough to threaten, just enough that she could see faint lines of tension along his temple. "What is his name?" he asked. "Daniel Bennett." The silence that followed was heavier than any accusation. A breeze moved through the clearing, stirring the pine needles in a slow spiral. Around them, Adrian had memorized that name long ago, though he had never expected to hear it spoken by someone standing in the very place Daniel Bennett had chosen silence over exposure. The council had debated what to do with the human who discovered the core. Daniel had walked away with a promise instead of punishment, a promise that protected both species at the cost of his own reputation. And now his daughter stood where he once stood, eyes bright with the same relentless curiosity. Your father made a choice, Adrian said carefully. One that preserved peace. Clara felt her throat tighten. He disappeared. Not all sacrifices are meant to be understood, Adrian replied. The ground trembled once more, stronger this time, and the faintest glow shimmered beneath the soil at the center of the clearing, barely visible but undeniable. Clara's breath caught. The forest was no longer holding its breath. It was awakening. The faint glow beneath the soil intensified, no brighter than the light of a distant porch lamp, yet impossible to dismiss. And Clara felt the warmth rise through the soles of her boots, as if the earth itself had drawn a slow breath. Her instincts urged her to step back, but curiosity rooted her in place. What is it? She asked, her voice lower now, no longer defensive but searching. Adrian did not answer immediately. His gaze remained fixed on the subtle shimmer radiating through the clearing, and Clara noticed the way his shoulders tightened, not in fear but in restraint, as though he were holding something powerful in check. It is the reason the pact exists, he said at last, and the reason it must not be disturbed. The words settled heavily between them. Clara knelt again despite the tremor beneath her, brushing away more pine needles until the faint outline of a circular pattern became visible in the soil, almost like a natural formation, but too symmetrical to be random. This is energy, she whispered, more to herself than to him. It is stable but reactive. It is responding to proximity. It is responding to you, Adrian corrected gently. The certainty in his tone made her look up sharply. That is not possible. It already has. The vibration pulsed once more, and for a brief second the glow brightened, reflecting in his silver eyes and in her widened blue ones. Clara's heartbeat accelerated, and she felt a strange resonance, like two frequencies aligning. Her father's journal had described the core as dormant, waiting, but he had never written what it was waiting for. Adrian stepped closer to the edge of the circle, careful not to cross an invisible threshold that Clara could not see but sensed. 30 years ago this power nearly tore both our worlds apart, he said quietly. Humans sought to measure it. Wolves sought to claim it. Neither understood it. Clara straightened, dust clinging to her palms. My father understood enough to keep it hidden. Adrian's expression shifted, something shadowed passing across his features. Your father chose silence because he saw what others did not. He saw that control would lead to destruction. The word control echoed in her mind again, and she thought of the research committee back in Lansing, of the grant proposals already drafted to explore energy independence and military applications. They would not see sacred ground. They would see opportunity. If this is a resource, she began, her voice unsteady, someone will come looking for it. They already have, Adrian replied, his gaze flicking toward the distant tree line beyond the clearing. Clara followed his line of sight, but saw only darkness layered with shadow. Still, a chill ran through her. The forest felt less like a neutral landscape, and more like a boundary line drawn across two histories. Why are you telling me this? She asked, studying him carefully. You could have forced me to leave. A faint, almost imperceptible curve touched his mouth, not a smile but an acknowledgement. If I forced you, the core would not quiet, he said. It would react. The glow beneath the soil softened slightly, as if responding to his restraint. Clara's scientific certainty began to fracture under the weight of what she was witnessing. This was not a random anomaly. It was relational. And somehow, impossibly, she was part of that equation. Above them the moon climbed higher, its pale surface beginning to tint at the edges, and the clearing no longer felt like an accident of geography. It felt like the center of something that had been set in motion long before either of them were born. The clearing did not feel empty anymore. It felt observed. Clara sensed it before she heard anything, a subtle shift in the air pressure, the faint rustle of movement beyond the ring of trees that did not belong to wind or wildlife. Adrian's posture changed almost imperceptibly, his head tilting slightly, as if listening to something carried on a frequency she could not detect. You are not the only one who followed the signal, he said quietly. Clara's stomach tightened. My team does not know I am here. I am not speaking of your team. The words settled with weight. From the shadows between the pines, figures emerged slowly, not rushing, not aggressive, but deliberate. 3 men stepped into the edge of the clearing, all tall, dressed in dark clothing similar to Adrian's, their expressions guarded. Their eyes flicked first to Clara, then to the glowing circle in the soil, and finally to Adrian. The air shifted again, tension threading through it like static. "My king," one of them said, the title respectful but edged with something sharper beneath it. Clara's gaze snapped toward Adrian. "King." The word rearranged everything she thought she understood. He did not correct the title. He did not deny it. He simply held the man's stare, silent authority radiating without effort. "You should not have allowed her this far." Another voice added, calm but cold. "The council will see this as weakness." Clara felt heat rise in her chest, not from the core, but from the implication. "I am standing right here," she said. The nearest man's gaze shifted to her with open scrutiny. "You crossed into sacred territory," he replied. "Humans do not wander here by accident." Adrian stepped slightly forward, placing himself between Clara and the other wolves without making a display of it. The motion was subtle, yet unmistakable. "She did not come seeking conflict," he said evenly. The core reacted before she understood where she stood. The word core made the men stiffen. One of them glanced toward the faint glow beneath the soil, and for a brief second uncertainty flickered across his face. "If it has awakened," he said carefully, "then the pact is already broken." Clara's breath caught. "I did not come here to break anything," she said. "I came because something is happening beneath this forest, and if it continues unchecked, more humans will detect it." Silence followed that statement. The men exchanged brief looks, calculations unfolding behind their eyes. Adrian knew what they were thinking. If humans traced the energy spike, they would not send a single scientist. Next time, they would send equipment, officials, enforcement. Curiosity would turn into claim. "How many know about your readings?" Adrian asked without turning toward her. "Only me," Clara answered truthfully. "For now." The faint glow pulsed again, brighter than before, and the vibration spread outward in a widening circle, subtle but expanding. One of the wolves took a half step back instinctively. "It is strengthening," he said under his breath. Adrian's jaw tightened. He felt it too, the resonance aligning with something deep in his own blood, something inherited from a mother who had once stood on the opposite side of this forest line. "If the council learns that a human triggered this," the first wolf said, "they will demand action." The unspoken meaning lingered heavily. Clara understood enough to know that action would not be diplomatic. She met Adrian's profile, studying the tension etched along his cheekbone. "Then do not let them act without knowing the truth," she said quietly. For a long second, his silver eyes met hers, and in that shared glance was a realization neither of them could ignore. Whatever the core was becoming, it would not allow either world to remain untouched, and the decision of what happened next would rest not with councils or committees, but with the two of them standing at its center. The wolves did not argue further in the clearing, but the message in their eyes was clear, and it followed Adrian like a shadow as he signaled for them to step back. They withdrew to the tree line, not retreating fully, just far enough to grant him the illusion of privacy. The core's glow softened to a steady pulse, as if aware that attention alone could alter its rhythm. Clara exhaled slowly, only then realizing how tightly she had been holding herself together. "Your council does not trust me," she said quietly. "They do not fully trust me either," Adrian replied, his voice even but edged with truth. The admission surprised her. Kings were not supposed to confess vulnerability. Yet nothing about this forest felt conventional. "Because of me?" she asked. He held her gaze for a long moment before answering. "Because of what I am." The wind shifted, carrying the scent of pine and something colder, almost metallic. Clara studied him more carefully now, not as a threat, but as a variable she had not accounted for. "You said earlier that the forest responds to some and not to others," she said. "Why would it respond to me?" Adrian's eyes flickered briefly toward the faint glow beneath the soil. "When your father stood here years ago, the core stirred but did not awaken. He could sense it, but it did not align with him." Clara felt the implication before he spoke it. "And with me," she pressed. "It aligns." The word echoed inside her, heavy and inexplicable. She had spent her life believing that knowledge was built from measurable cause and effect, yet nothing about this moment fit into a model she recognized. "You still have not told me what it is," she said. Adrian took a slow breath, as if weighing how much truth the night could carry. It is not merely energy, he said. It is a convergence point, a biological and elemental source tied to both species. It amplifies what is already present. Clara frowned. Amplifies what? Intent, power, connection. The vibration beneath them deepened slightly at the last word. In the distance, one of the wolves shifted his stance, clearly uneasy. Clara's mind raced. If the core amplified intent, then the wrong hands could turn it into something catastrophic without ever lifting a weapon. My father knew this, she whispered. That is why he chose silence. Adrian nodded once. He stood before the council and refused to reveal its location. He argued that neither humans nor wolves were ready. Clara's breath caught. You were there. I was younger, he said. Not yet king, but I remember his conviction. She felt a flicker of anger rise beneath the grief. And what happened after that? Adrian's jaw tightened. He left the forest alive. The wording was careful. Too careful. Clara's eyes narrowed. Alive is not the same as safe. Adrian did not look away. There were those among my people who believed his knowledge was a threat. The pieces began to arrange themselves in her mind, not fully formed but dangerously close. Are you telling me, she said slowly, that someone from your world silenced him? The night seemed to grow heavier, the moon now tinged faintly red at its edge. Adrian's voice dropped, not defensive, not dismissive, but burdened. I am telling you that peace is maintained by fragile choices, and some within both our worlds believe control is worth any cost. The core pulsed. Again, brighter than before, as if reacting to the truth suspended between them. Clara felt the vibration travel up through her bones, no longer just a scientific anomaly, but something personal, something intertwined with loss and inheritance. And as the red hue deepened across the moon's surface, she understood with unsettling clarity that the past had not ended with a pact. It had been waiting for this moment to finish what it started. The red edge of the moon deepened, casting a muted crimson wash over the clearing, and the core answered with a stronger pulse that rolled outward like a silent echo. The wolves at the tree line shifted uneasily, their composure thinning as the vibration intensified beneath their feet. Clara felt it too, no longer just through her boots, but through her chest, a resonance that matched her breathing and then gradually overpowered it. She pressed a hand against her sternum, startled by the sensation. It is synchronizing, she said under her breath, equal parts awe and alarm. Adrian heard the change in rhythm before she spoke it. The core was not simply reacting anymore. It was aligning, drawing invisible threads between the humans standing beside him and the ancient source beneath the soil. He stepped closer, not to restrain her, but to steady the space between them. Focus on your breathing, he said quietly. Do not let it pull you. Clara swallowed, fighting the strange pull that felt less like force and more like invitation. Pull me where? She asked, her voice strained but controlled. Into itself, he answered. The glow brightened another shade, illuminating faint geometric patterns in the earth that neither of them had fully noticed before. Lines curved outward from the center in intricate symmetry, almost like veins beneath skin. Clara's scientific mind cataloged every detail, even as her instincts warned her that analysis alone would not be enough. If it amplifies intent, she said, forcing clarity into her tone, then it is responding to something in me. Adrian did not deny it. You came here seeking truth, he said. That is not a neutral intention. The wolves behind him exchanged tense glances. One stepped forward, unable to contain his concern. My king, this is escalating. The council must be informed. Adrian did not turn. Not yet. The firmness in his voice carried authority that even dissent could not easily challenge. Clara drew a slow breath, steadying herself the way she would before presenting findings to a skeptical panel. If the core responds to alignment, she said, then perhaps it is not meant to be claimed or weaponized. Perhaps it is meant to connect. The word hung in the air. Adrian felt it in his bones. Connection was the one outcome both councils feared most, because connection blurred control. Your father believed something similar, Adrian admitted. He said the core was not a resource. It was a bridge. Clara's pulse quickened. A bridge between what? Adrian's silver eyes met hers, reflecting the red glow of the rising moon. Between species. The forest seemed to lean inward at the declaration, branches creaking softly overhead. The vibration surged once more, stronger than before, and Clara's vision blurred at the edges as if the clearing had shifted slightly out of phase. For a split second, she felt something not entirely her own, a rush of memory that did not belong to her, flashes of firelight, divided lines, a child standing between two worlds. She staggered back half a step, and Adrian caught her elbow instinctively, his grip firm but gentle. The contact grounded her instantly, the overwhelming pull receding to a steady hum. The wolves saw the touch and tensed, but Adrian did not release her until he was certain she could stand on her own. Clara looked up at him, breath uneven. "It showed me something," she whispered. "Or I imagined it." "You did not imagine it," he said quietly. The moon had now turned unmistakably red, bathing the clearing in a muted crimson glow. The core answered in kind, brighter and steadier than it had ever been. And in that charged stillness, both of them understood that the moment of awakening had passed. Whatever had been dormant for 30 years was no longer waiting. The red light of the moon settled fully over the clearing, no longer creeping at the edges but dominating the sky in a deep, muted crimson that turned the forest into a landscape of shadow and ember. The core responded with unwavering brilliance, its glow no longer flickering but steady and deliberate, as if it had reached a decision. Clara stood at the center of the clearing, her breathing finally controlled, though her pulse still carried the echo of what she had seen. The memory that was not hers lingered at the edge of her thoughts, a young boy framed in firelight, standing between two worlds that could not decide whether to claim him or reject him. She looked at Adrian differently now, not as a ruler or a stranger, but as the living continuation of that vision. "It is not just responding to me," she said quietly. "It is responding to us." The wolves at the tree line stiffened at the implication. One stepped forward again, voice tight with urgency. "My king, this has gone too far. If the council learns that a human stands at the core during the blood moon, they will assume invasion," Adrian finished calmly. "Or betrayal." The word betrayal carried more weight than accusation. Clara felt the tension ripple outward, not only from the wolves but from the forest itself, as if the land understood that the line between defense and fear was thinning. "If the council believes I triggered this," she said carefully, "they will act before they understand what it means." Adrian nodded once. "And if your government detects the surge in energy tonight, they will mobilize before asking permission." The truth of it settled heavily between them. Two worlds trained to react before they listened. The core pulsed again, and this time the vibration did not feel unstable. It felt focused. Clara stepped closer to the faint circle etched into the earth, careful not to cross the invisible boundary Adrian seemed to sense instinctively. "You said it amplifies intent," she said. "Then what is it amplifying now?" Adrian closed his eyes briefly, reaching inward the way he had been taught since childhood, beyond instinct, beyond politics, into the part of himself that bridged two bloodlines. The hum aligned with his heartbeat in a way it never had before. "It is amplifying convergence," he said softly. Clara absorbed the word, feeling its truth settle in her chest. Convergence did not mean domination. It did not mean surrender. It meant intersection. The wolves exchanged uncertain glances. One of them spoke more quietly now, no longer confrontational, but unsettled. "If this is a bridge, then it changes everything." "Yes," Adrian replied. "It does." The red moonlight deepened the silver in his eyes as he turned fully toward Clara. "Your father believed the future would not be decided by separation," he said. "He believed it would be decided by who was willing to stand at the crossing." Clara felt the weight of that statement press against her ribs. "And you?" she asked. "What do you believe?" For a long moment he did not answer, as if the truth required courage even from a king. Then he said, "I believe peace maintained by fear is not peace at all." The core brightened once more, no longer a hidden ember beneath the soil but a steady beacon under the blood moon. In the distance, beyond the forest line, faint mechanical interference crackled through Clara's dormant equipment miles away, registering the surge. The world outside Black Hollow was beginning to notice. And in the center of the clearing, beneath a sky turned red, the bridge between two species stood awakened, waiting for them to decide whether it would unite or divide everything they had ever known. The forest no longer felt divided into territories but suspended at a threshold, as if the land itself understood that what happened in the next few minutes would echo far beyond the trees. The red moon hung high and unblinking, casting a steady glow that turned the clearing into something almost sacred. The core shone beneath the soil in a constant rhythm, neither surging nor fading, waiting. Clara felt the distant vibration of her field equipment activating miles away, faint but unmistakable in her mind, and she knew that satellites would begin flagging irregular readings within the hour. She turned to Adrian, urgency replacing awe. "My research trailer is programmed to transmit anomalies automatically," she said. "If the spike continues, agencies in Lansing and Washington will notice. They will send teams." Adrian did not look surprised. "And my council will gather before dawn," he replied. "They will sense the shift and demand containment." The wolves at the tree line exchanged uneasy glances. The word containment carried consequences none of them voiced. Clara stepped closer to the glowing circle, careful but resolute. "If this is a bridge, then we cannot allow either side to claim it first," she said. "We need time." Adrian studied her, weighing not just her words, but her intent. The core responded subtly to their proximity, its light steadying when their focus aligned. "Time is rarely granted," he said quietly. "It is taken." Clara held his gaze. "Then we take it together." The simplicity of the statement settled into him with unexpected force. For years he had carried the burden of balance alone, mistrusted by factions within his own people because of the human blood in his veins. Now the human standing before him did not see that lineage as weakness. She saw it as connection. The core pulsed once, brighter than before, and a faint warmth radiated outward in a widening circle that reached the wolves at the edge of the clearing. They stiffened but did not retreat. Adrian stepped into the boundary of the circle for the first time, crossing the invisible line he had respected all night. The glow intensified but did not flare out of control. Instead it harmonized, the vibration shifting into a smoother, unified cadence. Clara felt the change immediately, as if a discordant frequency had resolved into something balanced. She extended her hand slightly, not touching the soil, just offering presence. The core brightened again, not violently, but decisively. The red hue of the moon began to soften at its edges, the eclipse moving toward its final phase. Adrian's voice was low but clear as he spoke into the charged stillness. "We will address both councils at first light," he said. "Together." The wolves behind him reacted with visible shock, but none interrupted. Clara drew a steady breath, understanding the magnitude of what he was offering. "They will accuse us," she said. "They will say we risk everything." Adrian's silver eyes held steady. Peace built on fear is already at risk. The core responded to the conviction in his tone, its glow settling into a steady, sustainable light rather than a volatile surge. In the distance beyond the forest, Clara's equipment registered a sudden stabilization of the anomaly, the spike leveling off instead of escalating. It would buy them hours, perhaps a day. Above them the red moon slowly began to pale, the first hint of dawn preparing to rise beyond the treetops. The bridge had awakened, but it had not chosen destruction. It had chosen alignment. And standing at its center, a king who carried two bloodlines and a scientist who carried unanswered questions understood that the fragile peace between their worlds would not be preserved by silence again. It would be rewritten by those willing to stand in the light when the sun returned.